Okay, hello and welcome back to another video. This time in this beginner series, because last video I showed you basically how to use Vim without really using Vim by just going into insert mode and writing some text. But that's of course no fun. We want to get the whole Neovim experience. So what we will do today is, under the assumption of not knowing anything about the terminal or Neovim, is installing Neovim, but also before doing that, we will choose a terminal emulator or terminal to work with, and we will set up everything you need to know. So let's jump straight in. There's a small note I have here because we will of course also be learning about the basic Vim motions, this whole idea of a modal editor. And you may end up really liking this idea, but maybe the other aspects of being in the terminal all the time and having to configure it, to make it your own, to have like your personal editor, maybe you don't even want that, maybe you don't need that, but you like the modal thing. And you are in luck because there is a Vim extension or a Vim set of key bindings for almost any editor. And even for other things, like I use it in my browser as well. And that means once you know these, you can jump into any editor. Say you have to use a certain editor for work or for study. You can just jump in there, enable Vim key bindings, and you are right at home without having to worry about anything else. So if you only need this, just take this from this video. But if you want to get started really with Neovim and want to understand how stuff works, just stick with me and we do the installation part as well. So before installing Neovim, we need a hopefully nice terminal emulator. It's called terminal emulator because it's not really a terminal. Back in the day, you used to have one big computer because, of course, computing resources were not as abundant as nowadays. And people working on this computer would connect to it through a terminal. And now you have your own computer. Maybe you even have a cloud computer, so it's very similar. But we want something to get us this command line into which we can enter commands. And it's just like a big text screen. There are a couple of those out there. Two I really recommend are Westterm and Kitty. I will also link those down in the description. And the reason I like those is they're fairly minimal, but they render really, really fast. They work very smoothly. I'm currently using Kitty, and the reason for that is I also sometimes like to display images in my terminal. For example, when I'm rendering markdown files, I'm looking at images in there. And Kitty has this Kitty image protocol, which allows you to display images in your terminal. Now, Westterm also supports this, so it works in Westterm as well, but I find it to be a tiny bit more performant on Kitty. And that's the reason I'm using Kitty right now, and no other reason. Now, if you are on Windows, a lot of people don't actually code directly in their Windows command line or in terminal on Windows. They use what is called WSL, the Windows subsystem for Linux. So what a lot of developers do is they sort of fire up a small Linux system from Windows, and you can access it through this WSL. And people do this either then coding in the command line with Neovim, but you can also connect to it from VS Code. For example, it has like a special mode that connects remotely to either an SSH server or WSL. So if you're on Windows, I highly recommend to check out WSL and then combine it with the Windows terminal because it makes it quite easy to open the new session in your WSL. So that out of the way, we are in our terminal. You have downloaded a terminal, you have started it up for the first time. You see this, an empty prompt, nothing in here. So what we want to do is install Neovim. We go to the website, click on install, and in this case, I want to choose a Linux version. We could just use the pre-built binaries, but in this case, I prefer the app image because it's one file that contains everything Neovim needs to run, so it's fairly easy to install. And I wanted to go over some command line basics so that you actually understand what the command we are about to execute is doing. Because you don't want to be executing just random commands from the internet, right? So I opened a terminal, and in here I have a shell session. So the terminal is just the interface to our shell, and the shell is the program that now interprets our commands. The most common one is bash, which I have in here. It's bash running. Other popular alternatives are, for example, ZSH or fish. And what I can do, for example, is press PWD, which stands for print current working directory, and it will print the current working directory. So this is where we are currently at. Now I want to actually close this terminal and open a new terminal in the working directory I am for my teaching. I can type ls to list files in here. I can cd into a directory and list stuff there. There's two special types of directories. Dot is the current directory and dot dot is the directory above this. So I could go cd dot dot and I'm going up again. So now I'm back in the original folder. I can touch files to create empty files. I can make dir to make directories. I can rm to remove files, all that kind of stuff. But the two most important things you will ever learn about the command line is there is the man command, which stands for manual. It gives you the manual of a program. So for example, if I want to learn more about the curl program we are about to use, I can ask for its manual. Another way of getting help about something is most programs, they take options. And with these options are only like if the option is there or not, it's called a flag. And sometimes these options take additional parameters. And one of these flags is --help. A lot of programs have this, and it gives you a quick help of what you can do with a program. So in this case, you go back to curl. Curl is a tool for transferring data to a server, or in this case, from a server. So we're using it to download Neovim. So let's actually do this. You can just copy this line, paste it in here, and we have now downloaded Neovim. We have nvim.appimage in our folder, but the next command will do something interesting to it. And before we do it, let's use ls with the -l flag for list to list stuff that is currently in a directory with some additional information. What we learn now is the file we created in the previous video, the main thing, is executable, which is why it has an X here. So these are the permissions of a file. So the first three things are for the user that created the file, and then we have users that are in the same group as the user that created the file, and then for everyone else. And we want to make nvim.appimage also executable. So if we execute this line, it will say for the user, also add the X, so make it executable. And now you see it has become green in my case, and also we get this X here. So now we can type nvim.appimage and it will be executed. Now in my case, it is already loading my configuration. So what I will do is whenever I open it, I will type clean, which you don't have to do, but it will just open it the way it will look for you without having configured it. Now we can quit again using :Q. But now, of course, this nvim.appimage is only in this directory. We don't want to go there every time we want to open Neovim and then like navigate somewhere else. We want to have this available whenever we open a new shell. In my case, I already have it, of course, installed, but this we want to install now. So we make, in this example, we make a new directory in the opt folder, call it nvim. Sounds like a good idea. In this case, I can't do it because the opt folder is only accessible by the root user. So you would type sudo make opt and do it in there. And then it will ask for your password. We can also put it someplace where only our current user can access it, such as, for example, in our home folder, which on the command line is expanded from the tilde symbol. So if I type ls tilde, it will expand there. And I can make a directory for my custom binaries, for example, call it bin in my home folder. And let's move nvim.appimage to this folder and just call it nvim. Now I have in this folder to this nvim executable. And what I want to do now is this pass thing. Now, what does pass stand for, or what does it actually do? So whenever we start a program or run something from the shell, it will look for that program on this so-called path. And this is where it looks for binaries to execute. Now we can ask the shell what program it would execute if we gave it a name. For example, if I type which nvim, it will tell me the nvim I currently have. And in this case, it is this in here, because I just moved it there. And I have this already in my path. I can also type which -a to tell me all of the options. So I have a bunch of nvims lying around here. Actually, apparently I have the bin folder in my home directory twice in my path. I should probably clean that up at some point. And then the second option is the Vim I compiled yesterday, I think, from the latest 0.10 version. And the other one is the app image from the stable version I also installed at some point. So we can go here, ask Vim for its version, for example. Yeah, this is the version I compiled. And this is the version we just downloaded. Now I will actually remove this again because I want to be using the 0.10 version, because I guess by the time this video comes out, eventually you will get an update to Neovim, and I want this video to stay relevant for longer and look the same way that the 0.10 version. And in 0.10 we actually get a new default theme, so I don't want to confuse you. So I will confuse you now if you are doing it right now with the latest stable version, because this looks still different. But I will not confuse future people that are on something after 0.10. So I should probably briefly explain what this bash rc even is. It is simply a file of shell commands that gets executed whenever you start a new bash session. So I can, it's funny because we are now installing Neovim, but in order to show you a file, I will probably need a text editor. So I will of course already use Neovim. It is a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but I guess you can also use the app image thing without even moving it somewhere. So if I go into nvim, I will use the clean version so you don't get confused by my configuration. And in my case, it is loading some files that are somewhere else because I have stuff a bit modular. But in your case, you would simply put this in here. And you can do it using the same techniques we learned in the last video. Okay, now that we have Neovim set up, it is time to learn the actual Vim basics. So this is the exciting part. I mean, the other part is hopefully also entertaining, but maybe not as exciting. So we are in this folder, and let me actually make a copy of this file such that I can show you the text operations in action without changing my script. Help nvim. It will advise us to do the Vim tutor. And this is an interactive tutorial I can really recommend, because the only way to really learn something is to do it yourself, to work through it, to practice. I could just do this as a little like let's play Vim tutor, but instead I want to just go back to my script and briefly show you what I think are the most important commands. Of course, they are not all of them, and maybe I'm also missing some, but those get you really, really far. And I'm doing it differently, not because I think it is better this way, but because I think it always helps to have different resources side by side in, for example, different speeds. So I will go faster than the Vim tutor, but this is no substitute for actually doing the tutor and practicing at your own pace. Let's get into it. So the first thing we learn is we can move around our cursor using HJKL if we are in normal mode, which we are normally. If we are ever not in normal mode, because for example we went into insert mode by typing I, now we type hello, and of course the L does not move our cursor now, it types hello. We can go out of insert mode by pressing escape. And we can press U to undo our last change, and we are back to square one. In normal mode we can go into command mode, which is what we previously did, for example, to write tutor. And you can see it on the left here that we get this tutor thing if I type here. And we also get completion for this. So if I type hell, I can press tab and it suggests I probably want help. And maybe I want to learn something about key mappings. So I can type help map. Now, how do I close this help window again? Well, :Q for quit is one way. If I want to quit this file and say I've made some changes to it, but I have not saved these, you can see down here the little plus symbol tells us that we have some changes, but they're not saved. I press Q, it says, no, you haven't saved. But what if I don't want to save, right? I need to just yell at it and go Q ! And now it allows us. Now there are more ways of ending up in insert mode. We can, for example, type A to append. So you see how our cursor is always this rectangular shape. I goes in the beginning in insert mode and A at the end. We can also type capital A to go in insert mode at the end of a line. Similar spirit, we have O to open a new line underneath and capital O to open the new line on top. Now, if we ever have a typo in here, like I typed one in instead of once, I can just type R, which stands for replace, and then type the character I want to put in here. There's also this sort of bigger replacement mode, capital R, where it keeps replacing as we go along. If we just want to delete a character, it's X. And now we get into the fun part, because X just deleted one character and it always does the same thing. It just deletes one character. But then we have operators that are a bit more advanced, like for example D. D stands for delete, but what do we want to delete? Well, for example, we want to delete to the next word. So DW would delete to the next word. So if we're here on E at end and type DW, it will delete until the U of up. The same can be done backwards. For example, we can type a DB and it would delete to the beginning of the word. So we have an operator and we have a motion. And these motions also work without any operators, which is super nice for navigating efficiently. So W moves by words forwards, B moves back by words, capital W moves by words, but it is more lenient in what it considers a word. For example, we may have an equal sign in here for some reason. If we go by word, we go to the equal sign, then to the, and we keep going. Capital W will jump over words only if they are separated by white space and does not care if there are special characters in between. Let's replace it with a space again. So we have W, we have E to go to the end of a word. And we can combine this with these operators as we like. So let's talk about another operator as we go, which would be Y for yank. So YW, we have now yanked the current word, which means we copied it. And we can paste it again using P for paste. Let's go into some more bigger jumps in a line. For example, we jump to the beginning of a line using 0. And we jump to the very first non-white space character using the caret symbol. And we can jump to the end using the dollar symbol. So for example, that means if we want to copy a sentence for like one line, we can just go 0 to go to the beginning and then Y dollar, and we have now yanked the whole line. There's, however, a shortcut to do just that, and that is a lot of operators that expect a motion afterwards. They also do the thing for the whole line if you just double the operator. So YY just copies the current line, whereas DD deletes the current line. Another nice thing of moving around in lines is using F and T. F means forward, so FL means we jump forward to the next L or to the next I, and then we can hit semicolon to jump to the next one again, and comma to go back. And we can also use T, which is like till or until, to go until the next L, but we jump like right in front of it. And all these operators also work backwards by using their capital version. So FM, I jump backwards to May. Or TU, and I jump to the U I was already on, so I press semicolon again to jump to this U on after U. Okay, let's do some bigger moves. For example, we can move to the top of the file again by typing GG, or capital G to move to the bottom. Let's go back to the top, and then we can move by characters using these braces. Something you will find very handy, especially when programming, is the %sign operator, because it moves to a matching bracket or parentheses or brace. Very, very handy indeed. And then something I use quite a lot also for navigating, not just for searching stuff, is the search operator, which now puts us in search mode down here. Searching here, for example, I search for Vim. I find all mentions of Vim. And if I hit enter, I jump there. See, I'm now on this one. If I type N, I go to the next match. So I can jump around in here. I can hit capital N to go to the previous match. So like in opposite direction. And this is again a theme you see again. Capital letters sort of do the opposite of the non-capital letter. Okay, now we come to one of my favorite operators, and that is C for change, in combination with some special text objects. So text objects is stuff we previously talked about, like words, for example, but it can also be paragraphs, or it can be sentences. All these have a representation, so we can talk to Vim or Neovim about these things, which is really, really handy. And becomes natural quite fast. You just need to give it a go. So for example, I want to change a word. Now if I type CW, it will change to the end of the word or to the beginning of the next. But I also want to change the beginning, so I could just move back and then type CW, and that works. But if I'm in here, I can also type CIW, which is change inside word. And then there's also change around word, which also includes the surrounding white space. And the same is true for sentences. So for example, CIS. Now remove the whole sentence. So change is a combination of delete and then going to insert mode. So I have sentences or paragraphs, CAP, change around paragraph, and then I can do a new thing in here. Or CIP, change inside, and you see it retained the white space. Now sometimes it is nice to see what will happen before it actually happens. So for this, you can go into a visual mode, V. Now I can mark stuff using my normal operators. So I can also go inside paragraph, and now I have the whole paragraph visually selected. I can change what end of the selection I'm currently changing by hitting O. And I'm currently in visual line mode, which you also get into by capital V. So this will always highlight a complete line as opposed to just V, which just does individual words, for example. And then there's also this sort of block mode by Control V, where I can mark like this. And then we can run operators on it. Like, for example, I can select this and just delete it, for example. Or I can select it and do something else with it. For example, run a command over it from this command mode. So one interesting command you might use quite a bit is the substitute command. So let's say we select this paragraph, go into command mode, which now includes these weird markers down here, which just tell Vim that whatever command happens now will be applied to from the beginning of the visual selection to the end of the visual selection. So we want to execute a substitute command, just S. Now we need to say something we want to search for, like for example, Vim. And we want to replace it with something, and it does it live already up here by default. Let's go Neovim instead. And we want to do it, in this case, it doesn't matter, globally on, which means it will do it multiple times on the same line if it's multiple times there, not just once. And you see, we did not do it in here, So let's visually select it. Whoops. Colon. Press up. And then we get our previous command. We can also press Control P. Now, instead of running something on just the current visual selection, we can also run something on the whole buffer, which is our text. And the percentage sign in the command line in the command mode stands for the current buffer. So we can hit %s, which now would replace, let's say, Vim again with hello. And now everything gets replaced with hello as soon as we hit enter. Or you sometimes see me hitting Control R, which undoes the previous undo. So it's the opposite of undo. Redo, I guess it's redo, yes. So the last thing in this modal editing scheme is counts and numbers. We can use counts to do something multiple times or to move across multiple of some text object. For example, if I go here and I type 3W, I move by 3 words. And I can do the same thing, 3B to move 3 words back. And we can combine this with operators. So I can go D for delete, 3, and then W to delete the next 3 words. Or I can, if I want to delete this whole thing, I could either go delete I inside paragraph, DIP, or I hit D to J, which means delete and delete 2 lines down. Speaking of lines, we should probably enable line numbers here. What we can do in here is set an option, which would be number. And now we added numbers. What some people also do is use relative numbers, which means they show you the line number on your current cursor, but then they show you numbers relative to that for all other lines, because they use navigation a lot using, for example, I want to go 6J, and it's a lot easier to see if your numbers are relative. But I think it would be interesting. I'm not using numbers a lot, I think, but it's an interesting practice. But it just goes to show that Vim or Neovim can be however complicated you want it to be or however advanced you want it to be. And your perfect workflow may not be my perfect workflow, but you can choose what makes you happy and what is fun for you. Okay, we have numbers here, but if I close this, oh, I just did :X, which is a shortcut for :W for write and Q for quit. It just does in one step. But if I open it again, my numbers are gone. So how do I get my numbers to be permanent? Well, this is where configuring comes in, and this is where the fun also begins a lot more. Now in Vim, you used to have this file called init.vim in your config directory, or a file called vimrc, just like the bash rc you have in your home folder. And in Neovim, you have the choice between a Vim file or a Lua file. Now, Lua is a fairly small and lightweight programming language that is nice and easy to pick up. And I think it is a lot easier and more extendable than using Vim script to configure Neovim, which is why a lot of things have moved to Lua now. But I want to show you both options, even though you will probably now, from now on, mostly see Lua configs by people. So if I make a new terminal here, I would go to config/nvim, and if this does not exist, you can make this directory. So make dir .config nvim. In my case, I already have it, so I'm not doing it. So that's a common thing you see on the command line. If something worked, it will not tell you anything. It just assumes it worked. If something didn't work, it will complain. So you'd make this folder and then you'd create this file. In my case, I will actually do it in my teaching directory. And instead of just calling nvim, I will use the -u option, which means, hey, use this config file instead. So if I make an empty file here, let's say init.vim, and I type nvim -u init.vim, well, I am just using an empty config file. I can edit this config file And now I'm in the file and I can do stuff in here. For example, I can type set number. Now the next time I would open Vim, it would have this set. If I want to do this iteratively, I can do so by just calling :source, which executes the current file, be it Vim script or Lua. And I think this did not do anything because I did not save. So let's do it again. And now we have numbers. You see the little 1 pop up. I can also put echo hello in here, just to show you that it indeed prints out hello. But Vim script feels a bit old, which is why Neovim is now using mostly Lua for configuring, for writing plugins, all that kind of stuff. So let's close this here and instead make an init.lua file. So how do we set an option? The same way we just did in our vimrc in your init.vim file in Lua instead. Well, we type vim.o, which stands for option, and we want to set, I think, number, and just set it to true. So in Vim script, it would be either number or no number, but in Lua, we just say true or false. So now save. I need to give it a file name. Wait, what folder are we even in? I don't know. Init.lua. We are writing this, and this file already exists, yes. So we yell at it to make it true. And now we can source it. Source the current buffer. And we got it. So that was the first step in starting to configure. And a great place to learn more about configuring Neovim is this Kickstart configuration by TJ, which not only comes with a very nicely documented init.lua file you can read through, it also comes with a video you can watch. And you can follow along and learn how to really configure Neovim. And then after going through that, I also have a video which takes this configuration and adds things, for example, for data science. So if you're into that, you can learn how to add features for Python programming to this Kickstart configuration, or for interactive data science with Quarto, which is what I talk about a lot. So if that is interesting for you, just jump to the next video that I link below, and I'll see you in the next one.